Hey there. Welcome back to Buckeye Bigfoot. Tonight's journey down into Sasquatch Valley is going to take us out to the Ozarks, Arkansas to be exact, where a pair of backpackers set up under a bluff spring, and they learned that bears and raccoons aren't the only forest dwellers out there working the night shift. So go on, grab your snackage for the journey, and get on up in the saddle. We're heading out on the trail down into Sasquatch Valley right now. You can call me Cal. I live in northwest Arkansas and spend most of my free time wandering short sections of the Ozark Highlands Trail, plus a mess of side tracks that the locals know and the maps don't. I'm not a hunter, I'm not a researcher, and I'm not out here chasing anything except some peace and quiet. I've always been the "it's probably a raccoon" kind of guy. After the night, though, that I'm about to describe for you, I do still think a raccoon is a raccoon, but I no longer say probably about every sound I hear in the dark. This happened last fall, last weekend of October. We'd had a warm snap, and a big wind came 2 days earlier that brought down a carpet of leaves. My hiking partner was my cousin, Dean. He and I grew up fishing the buffalo and dragging beater canoes across gravel bars that would skin your shins if you slipped. We both sleep just fine on rocks, and we don't mind plain oatmeal for our breakfast. We set out late morning from a county road pull-off, aiming at one of those bluff spring shelters that the locals call Under Rocks. It's an overhang with a little seep that drips year-round down the back wall, and then runs in a down cut to a narrow creek. If you hit it at the right time, the sand under the drip line will show you all the prints of raccoons, possums, deer, bobcats, anything else, just as clear as can be. You can see who's been in the neighborhood, or at least who's been taking a stroll through there. By the time we hit the site, the light was a soft yellow, and the air smelled of wet leaves, oak and hickory, mixed with a scratch of cedar. The overhang runs maybe 30 feet left to right, with a floor of hard-packed dirt, coarse sand along the drip edge, and a ledge at the back where the water collects into a shallow bowl before wicking down through a seam. You can put 3 tents under that rock if you set them right, but we don't bring tents for there. We string a tarp to keep the drips off of us, and we sleep fine under that. There wasn't a soul around, just one irritating gray squirrel with a big chattery mouth who kept yelling at me, just like my ex-wife did. I walked the site the way my dad taught me. Scan for widowmakers. Check the wind. Find what might trip you in the darkness and move it. And always check for broken glass. I did my usual toe scuff through the damp sand at the drip line, and I saw deer hooves, a coyote pad with some nail prints, and a raccoon's handprints all over, like a crazy little toddler had been at it. But there was nothing odd. We set up on the right side of the overhang where the floor is flat. Dean hung the bear bag line high off a tulip poplar in front, even though you don't normally see a lot of bear through there. It was just habit. We keep a tidy camp. Fire was made at the edge of the overhang floor. This would reflect light and heat back to the wall behind us. Supper was cheap and easy. Ramen noodles dressed up with some summer sausage coins that we browned in our small skillet. I know some folks hate cooking smells in the back country, but we were a good 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles from anything you might call a trailhead, and we figured the raccoons already had our number and location as soon as we clinked the spoon on the side of the skillet. So we ate, and we kept the small fire going for quite a while after we were done cooking, putting on dry oak sticks, but no big logs, and we let our socks steam out while the last of daylight faded. Night comes in the woods in stages, and you can not only see them, but hear them. First, you hear the birds trailing off, and then they go silent. The breeze will die down, and the last squirrel will stop chattering. Suddenly, your little fire crackling sounds as loud as the creek. Overhead, the rock will keep the dew off, but the bluff catches and holds the sound like an echo canyon through there. You can whisper to each other from 20 feet away, and if you're facing that rock, it sounds like you're just across the kitchen table from each other. We weren't in the dark more than 10 minutes when we heard the first thing that wasn't supposed to be part of the normal night sounds. It was a whistle. I don't mean the kind you blow, and this wasn't a bird, and it wasn't a person whistling with their lips either. It was 2 distinct notes, space between them, but soft like someone calling a dog late at night, and they didn't want to do it too loudly. It came from the left of the overhang, from the slope where the laurel and the young beeches crowd a heavily used game trail. Just 2 notes, then nothing. Dean and I did the same thing. We stopped mid-sentence, looked at each other, and listened. Then we shrugged it off like it must have been some strange bird. We went on talking about a coworker of Dean's. I do remember that conversation. Sometimes we carried whiskey with us in a small flask, but we didn't have any that night, and I wish we had. It just helps to calm you and to ignore all the weird sounds out there. But instead, we made tea in our mugs like a couple of old grandmas and watched the steam from our mugs while we talked. Maybe 10 minutes later, there was a single clack of stone on stone from the same direction. Now, this sound was very deliberate. This wasn't some loud, cracking, furious sound. Dean looked at me and matter-of-factly said, "River rock, cooling in the creek. They crack sometimes." "On a ridge?" I said. He looked at me and said, "Okay, Mr. Science, maybe it was an acorn that fell down and hit a rock." Anyway, we let that one go. The wind came in for just a few seconds, light and easy, just stirring through the oak leaves. I set our little pot back on the edge of the coals to warm a second cup. That's when the tapping started. 2 tapping sounds. Then they would stop. Then 2 more sounds. And stop again. The tapping was measured and slow, not frantic, angry, or any kind of a loud cracking sound. It sounded like rock on rock. The taps were one thing, but the other thing was how close they were, and they were very close. We looked around to the dark edges that surrounded us, but we couldn't see anything through there. In between taps, the fire crackles sounded louder than they were. After a few rounds of taps, it went eerily silent again. Dean looked at me and whispered, "Raccoon." And just as softly I replied, "A raccoon doesn't tap like your mom did before she opened your door." We sat frozen and listened. I strained to listen in the dark, and I heard something then. Soft breathing. Not heavy and not like a panting sound. Just easy, normal breathing. I heard that, and I looked at Dean, because I saw he heard it too. I could tell by his face. Then the tapping came again. 2 taps, a pause, then 2 more. Again, rocks on rocks. This time I pinpointed the sound direction better. I lifted my eyes without moving my head, focusing, and looked beyond the pot to the edge of the firelight, where the dark goes out beyond to more darkness. Something stood there. I was sure of it. I had to strain to pick out a dark shape there in the darkness, but it was there. My skin felt as if 1,000 ants were marching just under the surface, as every hair on me stood straight up, or felt like it did. I'd say it was about 30 feet out, well into the darkness, safely away from any light from our fire. There was no eyeshine, but we hadn't turned our headlamps on yet. But I saw it was there. Looking in that direction, I should have seen the lighter night showing through behind the branches of trees. But instead, there was an inky blackness that was taking shape right in front of me. If you've ever seen a dark shape in the darkness, you will know exactly what I'm trying to describe. I blinked several times, just to make sure my eyes were seeing what I thought I was seeing. But yes, There was a shape there, a very tall and very large shape. It came a step closer, and it became one shade lighter in the darkness. We didn't move, and it came closer yet again. Now I saw the outline taking shape, and it was not a comforting sight. It came within just a few feet of the fire, then came down to a type of a squat near the fire. I sat frozen in my spot. I kept blinking my eyes. Was this for real? Am I really seeing a Bigfoot? Oh, but it was real, all right. I glanced over at Dean. He was staring at the shape, too, realization of what it was on his face. Just outside the small fire, I had set the lid from the pot upside down to rest the spoon on. I saw one arm come forward. It was long and muscular. The large hand reached out and touched the lid, tentatively, like it was checking the temperature first. Then it rubbed its fingers on the metal rim. The lid wobbled, making a light metallic echoing noise on the stone. It was close enough to the firelight that I could now make out features of the face as it was just a few feet from me. The face was broad and wide. The eyes set farther apart than seemed natural. The eyes looked dark, solid black marbles with the firelight on them. The eyes were deep set under a thick brow line. Everything but the lips was covered in dark, short hair. The further out from the center of the face, the longer the fur got. But the face was short, tight fur. Think of a dog's muzzle. The eyes in the face had no expression that I could make out. It was like looking into nothingness, or maybe a statue. But at the same time, I knew I was looking at an intelligent being. It was too cautious and careful not to be. Its fingers were still touching the metal pot lid, but it was still looking directly at me. Dean, though, thought it was looking at him. It pulled its hand back. It continued to look at us with a blank expression. It was a very unsettling feeling. To be looked at by something that clearly has intelligence of some kind, but shows no expression, that's a chilling feeling. It might be planning to kill you, or it might be planning to just walk away. Kind of hard to say. I felt Dean's hand grip my jacket sleeve. Now, he's a big man, but he was shaking. And I'm not saying that to make him small. I'm saying it so you know we weren't out there playing with some raccoon and making up a big story. Dean is usually as steady as they come. I remember one time I was standing around and talking to him while he was up under his truck changing the oil. And all of a sudden, a copperhead slid right up under there with him. But Dean, he was cool as a cucumber. Killed it like it was nothing. But not that night. He was not cool as a cucumber at all. And I really wasn't in much better shape, if I'm honest with you. In the quietest voice I have, I said, "We see you." The eyes didn't move, but they changed. They hardened a little in their look. The eyes changed, and it was like a shotgun blast as it stood straight up and walked off into the darkness. When it stood up, I had the split-second thought that we were about to be torn to bits. But no, it just walked away. I looked at Dean, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Later, he said I looked exactly the same way. I probably did. Before we could say anything or process what we had just seen, there came that same two-note whistle from further left, and this is the part that bothers me even now. There was another soft whistle that came from the right of the overhang, like a reply. The second was higher and shorter in sound, like made by something with a smaller chest. We still hadn't turned our headlamps on. I know that sounds counter to reason, but turning those bright lights on up against the rock turns it into a wall of light in a way we didn't need. It was like turning your brights on in heavy fog. It doesn't help you to see any better. Now, after a few minutes, it seemed that was the end of it. We fed our little fire with a few more sticks that we had piled up, but we knew that wasn't going to last all night. We had not gathered enough for an all-night fire. We didn't know we might need one. Of course, during that time, we were whispering back and forth about what had just happened, what we had just seen. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes went by. Then from up on the slope, we heard a single wood knock. And from further down, closer to the creek, another knock answered. We fell silent and listened, both of our eyes searching in the darkness, understanding there was more than one of them out there. When silence came again, we resumed talking as if we didn't just hear all those sounds or see what we saw, but we were both listening to the night sounds all around us. As we were talking, my eyes picked up on the darkening of another shape where the first had just been. It came straight on this time, not slow or hesitatingly as the one had done the first time. I say it like this because I'm not sure it was the same one. But the shape came straight to the edge of the firelight, right within arm's reach. Well, at least within its arm's reach. And then came the hand again. It came out from the dark, across the light, and into it. A long arm with hair that caught the ember light, red-brown, with finger pads wide and pale in the glow. And I saw those fingers reach out to touch the pot lid again. This movement was slow and deliberate. To this day, my only guess with why it kept touching the metal is maybe there was nothing like it in the woods. I mean, there really isn't, is there? Metal is not normal or natural to find in the woods. It touched that pot lid, then it picked it up. Both arm and pot lid disappeared into the darkness. Okay, fine, I thought. I can deal with the loss of a pot lid, as long as this is the end of things. But of course it wasn't. Now, some will say we were crazy to not pack up and run right there, or even forget packing up, just run, even though doing that at dead night is a good way to break your leg or ankle. And when you're running from something that makes the forest its home and presumably can see better than you in the darkness, it really is not a good idea. So I watched the hand withdraw. There was a soft clucking sound from the darkness. Were those teeth clicking? Tongue clicking? I didn't know. And then a dry stick sailed over the fire and landed into the sand between our boots. This wasn't thrown to scare us or to hit us. This kind of throw was soft with no force. I have no idea what it was meant to be. We heard more of the clucking sounds accompanied by other sounds that are difficult to describe. So we knew for sure there was more than one of them out there, and that was the main thing we picked up on. Dean whispered again, "I'm not sure we need to stay here tonight." In truth, I did feel the same, but I didn't think heading into the dark was a better idea, as I have just explained. For all we knew, there could be 20 of them out there, and maybe the fire was the only thing that was stopping them from advancing. The minutes after that stretched into weird patterns, teeth and tongue clicks from different locations, hearing something moving and walking out there in the darkness, back and forth, like a pattern, like a soldier on guard. Twice we heard that 2-note whistle, and it was always answered by a higher one from downhill. At some point, we did turn on the headlamps, but we used our red filter mode and pointed them low. We really weren't trying to light up all the darkness out there, just give us some areas that we knew were clear. And that's when we noticed pebbles lined up over to the left of the fire. Smooth river stones. We hadn't seen a smooth stone anywhere near the overhang all afternoon, and we sure hadn't seen or heard of them to be placed there. Around midnight, the behavior around us changed. It wasn't coming close to the fire, but we heard heavy footfalls all around us. We'd try with the red light to find them, but we never did. From above us, on the overhang, along the rim, there was now the crunch of leaves and slow, steady footsteps. It paralleled the lip of the rock as we sat under it, and twice it stopped directly right over our heads. We heard a small snicking sound, like a toenail nudging a rock, then very low, open-mouthed exhale breathing from right above us. After maybe a minute, It finally moved on, and when it did, the smaller whistle came from the right, very close. Dean said under his breath, "Okay, I don't like this, man. This is officially weird." I agreed, but I didn't say it out loud. For several more minutes, there were teeth and tongue clicks all around, the shuffling and crunching of leaves, and the sound of branches moving. And there were a few more small limbs thrown into our space, which we were quite happy for. We broke them up and added them to our fire. We waited more than a half an hour, and together we carefully ventured just far enough outside the area to grab some more fuel for the fire. Normally, we never cut from trees, but we were desperate, and we weren't going to go far from the overhang, so we cut several branches nearby, and we got enough to keep us hopefully till dawn if we were careful. The fire wouldn't be big, but we didn't want to be without it. Now, despite saying there's no way he could sleep that night, Dean was snoring soundly by 2 a.m. I know I dozed lightly a couple of times at least, but according to my watch, they didn't total an hour together. Once, the fire popped more loudly than the other times, and it woke me up fast. I was thinking I heard someone step on something out there in the darkness, something coming close, but it was just the fire. When morning did come, I was awake. And here's the thing I discovered sitting there for hours like that. I was thinking a lot, and I realized I wasn't terrified or scared out of my mind during the night. I think unsettled is a better word. And before dawn, that unsettled feeling had turned to more of a dose of curiosity. Now, when Dean woke up, we didn't talk too much about him falling asleep. I know from experience that was a grace that he would and has extended to me before, even when I swore I would stay up and keep watch. We stretched. We made coffee and oatmeal in the pot that now had no lid. Down at the drip line, I did my usual toe scuff, and then I knelt with my headlamp to look at the sand. 4 impressions in a row led from the left side of the overhang across the wet sand, then back into leaf litter. Not a full foot, just 4 foot and toes pressed where the ground was softest. It was wide. The big toe stood off just a touch from the rest. You could see where the water had pooled in the print overnight and then wicked back. The edges were crisp as cut from fresh clay. I put my steel water bottle down beside just to eyeball the length. The bottle is 9 inches tall. The impression was longer than the bottle by a hand width, so I'm calling that about 16 inches, maybe a tad more. And it was wide. Next to it, my boot looked downright dainty, like my 3-year-old daughter's boot when she would line it up next to mine. I've seen human barefoot prints in sand my whole life. You know how human toes lay. But these weren't like that. The little toes there, they weren't curled, and they weren't narrow. But I looked for a long time, and then I looked again. Then I stood up, and I knew what I'd thought all night was dead on correct. No doubt about it. We had been visited by Bigfoot. Actually, several of them, though I only saw clear prints of one here. But that was enough. We broke camp slowly and carefully. We didn't talk much, and we minimized our noise. What was there really to say? And that morning, it felt wrong to talk with the forest all around us so quiet, like we were just calling attention to ourselves. When we packed up, we left the smooth pebbles right where they had put them. I didn't want to assume they were a gift for us to take. Maybe they were symbols of boundaries that were telling us, don't cross these at night. Who knows what's in the mind of a Bigfoot? Hiking out, we had the sense that somebody was following us at a distance. Of course, it could have just been some paranoia. Who wouldn't have been after the night we'd had? But the feeling stayed right with us. And then we heard things that reinforced the idea. Once we heard some leaf crush off to our left, and then the same on our right, like we had a flanking escort. It stayed with us all the way to the point where the slope pinches down to the creek and the trail there crosses a skinny log. Right at that spot, we heard a heavy footfall. Just one step, and there was a single solid knock from way up slope. That was it. We crossed the log, and the feeling of being watched and escorted completely left, and the woods returned to squirrels and birds making all the noise. I've gone back there twice since then. Once just 2 weeks later, with a cheap trail camera that I strapped low to a sapling that looks down the underrock. I got 57 frames of my own rear end moving around and one blurred nighttime shot of something. I don't know what. The rest of the night? Nothing. In the morning, I found the camera had been tilted to look straight down at the ground. Now, that could have been a raccoon. Could have been me not tightening the strap enough. The second time, in January, after a fresh snow, I found big melt ovals under the drip line where something had stood there a long time and warmed the ground up enough to melt the snow. There were no prints, just oval hollows, and a single, neat stick triangle leaned against a rock at the edge of the site. When I told my wife, she said I was just making symbols up and reading things out of kids and teenagers doing weird things in the wood. Maybe I am, but I did not move the triangle. I'm going to finish it this way. That night I saw the face in the firelight, clear and defined. Well, as much as anything is in the firelight. And I saw the body, its shape, its outline, and its height, which I guessed to be in the 8-foot-tall range. I saw defined fingers with an opposable thumb take our pot lid, though why I really can't guess. And those were some big fingers, big, meaty fingers, not little raccoon paws. I heard sounds that I still struggle to describe, and to this day I can find nothing like them anywhere on the internet, and I have been looking and searching. I know that night that I smelled something that I can only call wild. I know I found toe impressions in wet sand under a drip line where deer and raccoon are the more common visitors. All the rest would be passed off by me if I hadn't seen the face and the arm and the hand and the fingers. It makes me think of dozens of other nights out in the woods where I've had all kinds of weird things happen or I heard things that I didn't know what it was. And what did I do? I would always just shrug it all off. I wonder how many more times has a Bigfoot crept close to my campsite, and I shrugged it off. Now, if you don't believe me, I'm okay. If you do believe me, I'm okay. I'm not trying to sell a book or get on TV or any of that. In fact, I would avoid either of those things if offered. But I do feel the need to tell my story somehow. This was the only way that I feel I can do so without drawing attention directly to me or my family. If you do read this on your channel, please tell folks to be mindful when they're out there. You don't have to be terrified of these creatures necessarily, but don't be disrespectful either. Camp and behave as you would in heavy bear territory. Be smart about your food storage, and don't shoot things blindly in the darkness. And don't provoke anything that wanders near if you can help it. There are a lot of people out there who claim to know everything there is to know about these creatures, and they tell us all about their personality. Well, I know we don't know anything. Don't assume they are friendly. Don't assume they are violent. Don't assume anything, because science has not proven anything. If you do encounter one, watch them carefully. Be aware if there are others. Keep distance if you can, and react accordingly. The distance is the crucial thing. I don't claim to know everything about these creatures either, but I've looked into a Bigfoot's face. I've seen his eyes and the cold intelligence that's there. It could have been thinking of anything at all, how to best pull me apart, chew on me like a big old chicken leg, or it might have been thinking of nothing at all. We don't know, and I'm not convinced that I do want to know. You can call me Cal. I won't say exactly where this bluff is. The locals here already know, and the rest of you, well, maybe you'll figure it out from a map, but I hope not. I do still camp there. We leave the place cleaner than we found it, as we always do, and the cup is still there at the seep. And many, many times I've found lines or stacks of smooth stones along the trail there, and definitely at the overhang. I don't disturb them, though. If I see a pile and it looks like it's been knocked down, I do try to rebuild it. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but my heart is in the right place, I guess you could say. And I always make sure to gather more wood for the fire than I think I'm going to need that night. I suggest you do the same. Signed, Cal from Arkansas. Being visited by creatures when you're out in nature, well, that's not unusual, is it? It's par for the course. But I don't know if that includes a visit from Bigfoot, or several Bigfoots, as the case was for Cal. And don't forget, if you've had an encounter, big or small, or a glance in the headlights, or something that takes the lid off of one of your pots at the campfire, be sure to send it in. Tell it to me just like you tell your neighbor as you're sitting on the porch sipping some coffee, and I'll share it with everyone else, just the way you wrote it. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you for staying with me to the end once again. Until we meet up again, please always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. And be sure to stay aware of what it is on the other side of your campfire. Good night, folks. Thanks for listening.